seminar that we have today is part of Wiki for Human Rights 2021, which is a collaboration between Wikimedia Foundation and United Nations for Human Rights. Before we start our trip in the world of nature and environment, let me introduce our guests for today. So, Rana Jukhadar, who is a specialist in environment and who has a master in management on sustainable development from the University of Karlskrona in Sweden. We have Hent Risk with us, expert in environment, and he has a master in geochemistry, environmental geosciences from Luleå University in northern Sweden. Edmond Fadel, board member of Mosaic, and Alex Stinson, chief organizer of Wiki for Human Rights campaign. And I am Nanur Karabedian, member of Wikimedia Sweden and the Wikipedia editor. So today Anas Sedrati is doing interpretation from English to Arabic and Arabic to English also. For those wanting to activate interpretation in English, please choose the choice interpretation and select the language you would like to listen in Arabic or English. So we are broadcasting live through Al Compis, and it will also be recorded and shared through social media links. So for those not being able to attend, you will also be able to follow the recording later. So we'll start the seminar, and we start with Rana. So Rana, when we talk about environment, some words are popping up like sustainable and sustainable development. We hear a lot about these acts, especially from environmentalists, from activists, from organizations about these words. How can you define these words? So in linguistic terms. And what is its relationship with environment? So sustainability linguistically means permanence and durability. So the continuity of the thing. As a term, it describes how biological systems remain diverse and productive over time. So when we talk about sustainable development, which is in English sustainable development, has a lot of definition. One of the clearest and simplest definitions is from the Brundtland Commission, 1987, saying what we want from humanity is a development that enables people to meet their needs at the present time without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs in the future. So, Rana, why do we need sustainable development? Is it something we need in our daily life, or is there a risk for future generations? Yes. So in reality, human society with its current activities destroys the ecosystem and puts the future, even the near future, in front of great challenges. So currently, we are using the resources as if we have 4 planet Earths. So sustainability is suggesting a different number of changes in our current way of life to stop demolition the ecosystem and ensure the continuity of human life. So when we talk about the future, Rana, is it a specific period of time, 50, 100 years? What do you talk about? So the time flies fast, and we have only less than 10 years that are remaining now. And according to United Nations, especially the IPCC and their report, they had issued the report in 2019. So we have only to 2030. And this is why 2030 is very related to sustainability. So we have until 2030 that the global warming is likely to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius. After that, any increase will result in big dangers or the point of no return in the consequences that will be touching the environment. So there are dangers of drought, of warming, of greenhouse effect, and also of poverty that's going to touch millions of people. So the Agreement of Paris was a big step to unite forces through the world and to stop the dangers that we have now. And it has to be limited, the global warming needs to be limited to 1.5 degrees until the end of the century. So there is a video that we can watch in order to understand what is global warming and the greenhouse effect. So let's watch the video and come back. So let's watch the video.
Greenhouse effect greatly affects climate. See if you can describe how carbon dioxide and water vapor cause the Earth's greenhouse effect. Also, see if
we are facing a technical problem. I think, Nanur, we can start with, because there have one question. I think Rana can answer it. Sorry for that. We have one question in the chat. I think Rana can answer it.
لحظة لشوف. Can I just yes here? What are point of non-return that we already exceeded?
أنا برأيي نانور إذا بتكملي من عند يوضح الفيديو كذا وتتابعي.
So there is a technical problem that is going to be solved quickly, hopefully.
Rana, can you please answer the question in the...
Yes, I am. جاوب كتابي ولا؟
لا حكي الكلام.
Okay. نحن لسه ما وصلنا لنقطة اللاعب.
So now we still did not reach the point of no return. But if the global warming is beyond 1.5 degrees, we will be reaching a bad consequence for the environment where we cannot come back. So there'll be droughts, there will be floods, there will be big extensive warm, and this is why it was agreed that we have to not go beyond global warming of 1.5 degrees until the end of the century. So if we do not make changes until 2030, there will be problems, and this is why we have to change our behavior as soon as possible in order not to reach the 1.5 degrees. So let's see if the video would work. Now it's working.
describe how carbon dioxide and water vapor cause the Earth's greenhouse effect. Also, see if you can describe how the greenhouse effect maintains the surface temperature of Earth. Scientists have long known that the presence of an atmosphere keeps the surface of the planet warmer than it would be without an atmosphere. In fact, Without an atmosphere, the surface of the Earth would be about 30 degrees Celsius cooler than it is now. In order to understand why, we need to consider the surface of the Earth and its atmosphere separately. Because there is a radiative equilibrium, we know that the planet emits enough long-wave radiation into space to equal the solar radiation absorbed by it. However, most of the long-wave radiation that is emitted by the planet into space is emitted by the atmosphere rather than the surface of the Earth beneath it. Although the surface of the Earth does emit long-wave radiation, only about 10% of this radiation passes through the atmosphere and escapes into space. The rest is absorbed by clouds and by greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. There are many greenhouse gases, but the most abundant greenhouse gases are water vapor and carbon dioxide. Short-wave radiation from the sun passes through greenhouse gases, but long-wave radiation is absorbed by them. Greenhouse gases absorb long-wave radiation that is emitted by the surface of the Earth. Subsequently, they re-emit the energy as long-wave radiation in all directions. About half of the re-emitted long-wave radiation does escape into space and contributes to the planet's radiative equilibrium. About half of the long-wave radiation emitted by the gases is directed back toward the surface of the Earth. As a result, a continual exchange of long-wave radiation takes place between the surface of the Earth and the atmosphere above it. The long-wave radiation contained in this exchange causes the warming effect known as the greenhouse effect. This phenomena is known as the greenhouse effect because, like the glass in a greenhouse, the atmosphere traps some of the energy beneath it. The greenhouse effect produces a warmer climate on Earth than would be possible without an atmosphere. In summary, water vapor and carbon dioxide allow solar energy to penetrate Earth's atmosphere but prevent much of the long-wave radiation emitted by the surface of the Earth from escaping to space. This trapping of long-wave energy is called the greenhouse effect and enhances the surface temperature of the Earth.
ممتاز. نحن شفنا الفيلم رنا واللي بيوضح هي
So
ظاهرة
we just watched the video, Rana,
الدور
explaining the global
تماما مثل ما شفنا الغلاف الجوي هو مكون من غازات أهمها
and the greenhouse.
بالنتيجة للنشاط البشري عم
So
يصير في انبعاثات إضافية لهي الغازات، ولما لما عم يصير في انبعاثات إضافية عم تحبس
there are many
الشمس أكثر وبالتالي تزيد من
and when the temperature of the sun becomes higher, it creates a problem for global warming. And this is the challenge. So we have to stop these emissions resulting from human activity to keep the climate change to 1.5 degrees. So now that we learned that sustainability is the continuity of the diverse biological systems on Earth, and sustainable development is the change of modification, how can sustainable development be achieved through these changes? Is there a clear process or mechanism that we should follow?
أول ما ظهرت تحديات تغير المناخ كان في حالة من الفوضى، يعني في إدراك للمشكلة.
So in the beginning there was a bit of chaos because there was no clear definition of sustainability. So today I want to talk about a Swedish experience, a pioneer, which is from the scientist Karl-Henrik Robert and the professor Göran Broman, who worked with each other in a team with 50 experts from different fields in order to do research to understand what is sustainability and how can we work with it. and the result was gradual and, until they reached what is called the Framework for Strategic Sustainable Development, FSSD. And it defines what is sustainability and how can we reach it in the future. So these research show that there are 8 principles that we can follow to reach sustainable society. So what are these principles? So these are the policies or the rules that should not be crossed, and in order to protect the environment. So let me give you an example. So for example, if a company would like to do a shift into sustainability, so it has to analyze its activities according to these principles and see that its activities do not violate any of the 8 principles. If the activity is violating one of these principles, then it has to change it. And these are the limits that should not be crossed. So now we're curious to know what are these principles, the 8 principles. Of course. So there are 8 principles of sustainability. 3 of them are environmental and 5 are social principle. So let's start with the environmental ones. The first one, in a sustainable society, so nature is not subject to a steady increase in concentrations of material extracted from the Earth's crust. And we're talking here about oil or gas. So it should be stopped, extracting these items from Earth. So why should we stop extracting it? These materials are present in nature in a balanced way. And when we extract them from the core of the Earth, it creates an imbalance in nature. So the second principle. So now we left the Earth's crust and we are in a society. So in a sustainable society, the environment is not subject to a systemic increase in concentrates of substances produced by society. So there are many activities that are working with fossil fuel, like transportation, which increase a lot of emissions of gases that are then creating global warming. So our activities should be done so that we do not increase these emissions. So this is the second principle. The third principle is, in a sustainable society, the environment is not exposed to physical degradation and damage, something that could be sensed, such as deforestation, excessive use of groundwater, accumulation of waste, etc. So these concrete actions that destroy the environment. So these are the 3 environmental principles. Excellent. So Rana, please allow me to talk about these environmental principles before we go to the social one. And let me ask Hind. We saw the results from the Swedish studies that gave us limits that should not be crossed to reach sustainable environment. So can you please explain this in another way? What does it mean that the environment is not physically damaged? What is the meaning of this? Can you please clarify these ideas? Yes, sure. First of all, let me explain this with a sketch. So let's imagine our planet as an apple. So it's representing ancient energy resources such as fossil fuel, oil, and the others, and mineral ores on the ground. So we are gradually devouring it and extracting and taking the resources until it become this way. So unfortunately, there are only 10 years left. So let's imagine that the result of eating the resources of waste and residues we will give it back to the apple, which becomes in this way. And by repeating this process, we will get this new form. And by repeating this operation many times, instead of an apple, we will have just a mass of garbage that cannot even become in the shape of an apple. And this is unfortunately what is happening to our
الحقيقة للأسف هي صور
planet.
صادمة واقعية. مثل ما
It's really shocking pictures, but also realistic ones. So as you know, with all this consumption that we do in the modern life, there is a lot of waste that is produced. How can we make sure to consume what we are doing without destroying the environment? So how can we do this without damaging the nature? Yes, you're right. With all this consumption that we're doing now, it's important for us to find a renewable resource like wind energy or solar energy. And this is exactly the idea of sustainability. So even waste is a source of energy and also a source protecting the energy. So there is a good application of that called the 3 R's. And this word is of 3 words, of course. So first, reducing. So reducing what we are using. So if I don't need something, why do I buy it? Reuse. So things that can be reused in different ways, not only once. And then I can throw it after I use it many times, not the first time. And the third R is recycling. So as you know, it's a term that is about sorting, assembling, recycling, and also reusing. So if we go back to the resources, let's say I need iron. Let's open an iron mine in the north of Sweden, in the city of Kiruna, which is famous for iron. Yes. So what does it cost to nature? So we are actually shifting Earth. So what is in the bottom becomes on the top,
يعني بنهاية الأمر
just to
سأحصل
get
على الحديد أكيد.
the iron.
لكن ما المقابل لهذا؟ سينتج عندي العديد من المواد الخطرة التي تدمر البيئة ومنها
that will destroy the environment. For example, some gases that are going to destroy the nature. We are going to get a lot of dangerous items that can contribute to a big imbalance in our environmental system. So this sulfuric acid is something that comes from the nature, which is natural, which comes and goes back to our natural cycle normally. So it's something that is coming in our cycle, and this is natural. It occurs all the time, and there should be a percentage of any gas or material in the nature. But because of the genius human being, these percentages change in some places. So they become more what they should be, or sometimes they become less than they should be. And this is what is creating imbalance in our environment. So why do we need to have a mine? So if I have other resources, why should I have a mine? And my answer to your question is we are using some items like plastic, like bags. So some things that are in the waste are even more damaging. So what I need to do is need to do better sorting and more recycling. So this change needs to be done, and the good recycling needs to be done, but it needs a lot of sorting and the good proper sorting. Thank you very much for this clarification. We have talked now about the environmental principles. So we go back to Rana in order to talk about the social principles. So can you please explain what are the social principles? So these social principles are 5. Before I start, there is a word that is important, which is the barriers. So these barriers are coming from economy, from politics, from society, that a human being or an individual cannot affect. So the fourth principle is, in a sustainable society, people are not subject to these barriers or obstacles when it comes to health. For example, you should not work in hazardous working conditions or lack of resting periods or vacations. The fifth principle is, in a sustainable society, you are not subject to structural obstacles or barriers when it comes to your ability to influence. For example, when there is a suppression, freedom of expression, or opinions are excluded. The sixth principle is, when people are not subject to these barriers or obstacles when it comes to obtain competence. For example, there should not be obstacles to education or no possibilities for personal development. So this should be actually available. The seventh principle, in a sustainable society, people are not subject to barriers when it comes to impartiality or parity. So there should not be any racial discrimination or unfair choice of jobs. The eighth principle, last one, is, in a sustainable society, people are not subject to structural obstacles in their society when it comes to meaning making. For example, suppression of the cultural expression or putting barriers preventing participation in creating meaningful or matters. So for example, if we want to have an association and we are not allowed, it's a breach to this principle. So we should have these principles if we want to call our society a sustainable one. So there's a linking actually between the social and the environmental principles to call a society as a sustainable one. So now we have heard about these principles, both environmental and social. So now I'll go with you, Alex, about the results. So there were results from Swedish studies about environment. So now we want to go to a bigger circle, which is United Nations. So United Nations has its own goals. Is there a link between the principles of sustainability that we explained with the principles set by United States? Where do they join each other?
Yeah, so at the international level, there's a group of goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them that really seek to set an agenda that everyone can agree on.
تهدف إلى تطوير أجندة يتفق عليها الجميع. كيف نجعل الاستدامة ممكنة لجميع المجتمعات؟ وهي أهداف مشتركة بين عدة أطراف ومجتمعات، بل وحتى حقوق الإنسان. هناك عدة طرق للعمل يتفق عليها عالميا، كيف التعامل مع الناس عبر المجتمعات، وهي طبعا أمور إنسانية حتى وإن لم يتم الاتفاق عليها أو تطبيقها أو تشجيعها، ولكن متفق عليها. ومن خلال العمل على الاستدامة يعني هناك لقاء بين العمل أو هناك اتفاق على أن العمل على الاستدامة مرتبط بحقوق الإنسان ومرتبط بحقوق أخرى مثل الحق في الأمن والحق في الدراسة والحق في العمل، وهي أمور متفق عليها عالميا وأساسية لكل شخص لكل إنسان، وهي أمور يجب الدفاع عنها أينما كنا في الأرض. أنا من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، وأنا أتابع الأمور في أمريكا الجنوبية ومناطق أخرى، وأعرف عندي أمثلة حول هذه الأمور. يعني كانت هناك كارثة بيئية في كولورادو في إحدى المناجم قبل سنوات، منجم للذهب، وكان يعني فيه الكثير من التلوث. كان هناك مياه ملوثة نتجت من هذا المنجم، وثم يعني نقل هذه المياه ولم يتم الاكتراث بها والاهتمام بها، وقامت بعد ذلك ب أودت إلى وصول أو إلى يعني فيضانات، وهذا أثر على الكثير من الناس، وانتقلت هذه المياه إلى ناس يعني تأثروا بهذا الأمر، وهذا مشكل بيئي كبير. فلما نتكلم عن الاستدامة، فنحن نتكلم كذلك من كيف نوقف هذه الكوارث، ولكن أيضا كيف نضيف تكون عندنا إضافات في المجتمع من أجل الدفاع على يعني المياه وعلى الأراضي، وهي حقوق مهمة لكل الناس. وحتى إذا وقع شيء ما مثل ما تكلمنا عنه بالنسبة للمنجم قبل 5 سنوات، حتى تكون حقوقنا مضمونة في المجتمعات، وأن يساعدنا الناس. وهذا مرتبط بالمشاكل العالمية حول التغير المناخي، يعني هي ليست نقطة واحدة منعزلة، ولكن هو شيء عالمي. كل شخص في المجتمع له دور وهو متواجد في هذه البوثقة. استعمال الوقود الأحفوري هو كذلك أمر قد يؤثر، سواء في أمريكا أو في أوروبا، ولكن ليس فقط هنا، ولكن الكل مسؤول في العالم كله. فكيف ستكون عندنا أنظمة حيث كل شخص له هذه الحقوق، يستطيع الدفاع عن هذه الحقوق البيئية؟ وهنا إذن ترتبط حقوق الإنسان بالحقوق البيئية. وحق البيئة هو بالمناسبة حق من حقوق الإنسان معترف به في أكثر من 50 دولة، والأمم المتحدة تشجع يعني أن تعترف الدول الأخرى كذلك بذلك، وأن تكون في إعلان حقوق الإنسان. إذن الأهداف المرتبطة بالأمم المتحدة هي أهداف لكل المجتمعات. نحتاج كذلك إلى التفكير في كيف يمكن أن نقوم بمناصرة الحقوق المرتبطة بهذه الأهداف. شكرا جزيلا أليكس، وأنا معجب بغرفتك.
حكيتي إنه حتى نحافظ على البيئة، واحدة من أهم الأمور هي recycling.
If we want to protect the environment, it's an important subject, especially for the Arab immigrants here in Europe. So we found that here recycling is something that is really important and one of the fundamentals of life. Can you please talk to us more about this subject? So we don't have this in our countries at all. But when we came here, we learned and we need to improve. So first of all, we need to know how to sort out the waste right. So before I start talking or going extensively, let's watch this video about what Sweden is doing about waste. Yes, please.
Produces garbage. Sweden is no different, but it's what they do with that waste that is a bit unusual.
Swedes produce a fair amount of waste, approximately 460 kilos per person and year, which amounts to 4.4 million tons every year. Less than 1% goes to landfill, and the rest is about 50-50 recycled and energy recovery.
With recycling and sorting of garbage a way of life, Sweden is able to convert much of its waste into energy. With its 32 incineration plants, Sweden is considered the world leader in the field of waste to energy, or energy recovery. In Helsingborg, in the south of Sweden, about 40% of households get their district heating from garbage incinerated at the brand new Filborna plant.
The waste that we use here comes from two main sources, the households and industrial waste. It is sorted. meaning that scrap metal, foodstuffs, glass, etc. has been sorted prior to incineration here. A good number to remember is that 3 tons of waste contains as much energy as 1 ton of fuel oil. So there's a lot of energy in waste.
In Sweden, we incinerate 2.2 million tons of household waste in these plants every year.
Despite the millions of tons of garbage produced by the Swedes, the plants have an overcapacity. This has led to an interesting business for Sweden, the importing of waste from other European countries.
Waste today is a commodity in a different way than it has been. It's not only waste, it's a business. We import approximately 800,000 tons yearly. We sell a service. It's mainly Norway, it's the UK, Ireland, Italy.
What we have here is imported English household waste. Each one of these weighs about 700 kilos, which corresponds to 250 kilos of fuel oil in energy terms. So there's a lot of energy here. 20% of the fuel that we use here at the Filborna plant is imported primarily from England. It is sorted waste. Metals has been sorted out, glass has been sorted out, foodstuffs has been sorted out. The English authorities, the English government is increasing taxes on landfills every year. So there's a pressure on finding other solutions than landfills in England.
It seems like a win-win, good business for Sweden and less landfill in Europe. But it's not without controversy. What about the environmental impacts of waste to energy?
Is this clean energy? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Compared to the alternative of landfill, this is a much better solution. Having said that, all incineration of waste must be done in a proper manner. We are at half of the levels that are actually permitted. So we are far below the emission levels that the authorities has demanded from us. In a European perspective, every year some 150 million tons are landfilled every year throughout Europe. So there are huge amounts of waste.
As we speak, EU is looking at the legislation and the Waste Framework Directive, and we think that they're going to suggest higher recycling targets and also more landfill bans.
I think in the long run, the world needs to produce less waste. The world has a garbage problem. In the meantime, waste incineration and extracting energy from the waste is a good solution.
طيب
Okay,
تفضلي كلمة عن الفيديو.
so please explain to us more about this video. So as we saw in the video, waste is transformed to energy, and it needs to be sorted before it's transformed. So as we know, in Sweden, most of the landfills have plastic, cardboard, paper, metal. So let's suppose that I don't want to sort, because in my point of view, everything is going to be thrown as a waste. So let me throw all these things in one place, and they're going to be burned. So, okay, they are burned, but they are going to emit gases. Of course, yes, the gases are going to be, poison is going to be removed from these gases, and they're going to be treated. But not all pollutants will be disposed of. And the polluted water is thrown out of the company, and the factory will throw this water, and this water we cannot really control it, so it will end up polluted in water bodies, and it will either be absorbed by plants or by fish, and we will eat this fish. And we know that there were a lot of warnings about not eating large fish, especially by children or pregnant women, because they might have high levels of mercury or toxic metals. And this is what is happening when we don't sort waste. Yes, now you convinced me. I want to recycle and sort out the waste. Me as a person, as an individual, I'm not a government. What should I do to participate in this effort? There are so many examples. I will just give one of them. So we don't buy what we don't need. So we reduce the first R. So I try to buy from second hand, especially that they are spread in all cities in Sweden. And this is very useful. So first of all, I help people. This money goes to humanitarian associations. It saves marine animals. There are so many fish dying because of this first washing of clothes. The polluted water is thrown in the seas. So the first victim are the organism living in the sea. Let's suppose that they don't have a problem. The second victim is us, the consumers. So let's apply the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Another thing, a good thing in Sweden, a wonderful thing in Sweden is that there are many social media and social networks enabling us to buy, sell, or even give things for free that we want to get rid of. So for that, I will save production capacity, extraction of the material, and the cost of manufacturing by applying the 3 R's. Another thing, maybe small, but it makes a very big difference. So stop buying bags when I buy. When I go to the supermarket, why do I always buy a bag? Why don't I keep the same bag with me all the time? A same one, a reusable one. So whenever I go to shopping, I use the same bag. In this case, just throw any chewing gum on the floor. There will be an organism like a bird can eat it and die, and there will be a problem in the environment. And if there is imbalance in the nature, it will make bigger and bigger problems, maybe resulting in that of the human beings and the full environment. So I have to think 1,000 times before I throw anything in a place that is not made for it. Yes. So we have talked very good about the importance of sorting out and also not to buy things that we don't need. So if I have a factory or a company and I want to be sustainable, what's good for me to be sustainable? Is there any benefit for me in being sustainable as a company owner?
في هذا المجال حابة أذكر دراسات البروفيسور الكندي بوب ويلارد.
So I would like to mention a research from a Canadian professor, Bob Willard, who did research about sustainability and especially about companies.
عندما للشركات عندما تقوم
So
بالتحول
results from this research was that there is a benefit for companies. So first of all, there is a bigger picture, a better image for them. They'll get 51% more in benefits, while the bigger companies get 81% more in terms of finances for their image. So this is the idea that should be transmitted to company owners. There are also 7 things that companies benefit from when they make a sustainable shift. So it has not only a positive impact on the environment. So the 7 benefits are for the companies. So first of all, they get more benefits financially. Second, you have less consumption of energy. You have also less waste. Fourth, you use less material. And of course, if you use less material, you have less waste. The fifth benefit is more production. Sixth is less people working less. And the seventh one is less risks. And even employees become more loyal when the company is sustainable. And this is why social sustainability is very appreciated. So there are many examples. I want to give the example of the company, General Electric Company, that had a plan in 2010 to invest an amount in sustainability. So they invested $1.5 billion and to increase their sellings in environmental products for $20 billion. In 2010, they did that. So this initiative resulted in 2012, where the benefits were $25 million, and they reduced their emissions by 30% within 2 years. So the beneficiaries were the company, the employees, and the environment. It's a win-win. And I would say that this is a necessity for economy, and sustainability is very useful. Here in Europe, governments are aware about this, so they impose this by law. And we hope to see it in Arabic country as well, and in other countries of the world. So now that we talked about people, I will ask a question to Alex. And if you want to listen in Arabic, you can go to the Arabic interpretation. So Alex, we heard about companies and people. As Rana mentioned, governments are working on that. But are all governments working on sustainability and applying these sustainable goals? If yes, do they make sufficient
فردية أو مثال الشركات؟
So one of the things
نعم. واحد من الأمور التي علينا أن تكون عندنا يعني ونفكر فيها عندما نتكلم عن الاستدامة هي أنه نتعامل في أنظمة أكبر منا. إن المجتمع مبني حاليا حول النفايات والتلوث، ولهذا مهم لتغيير الأنظمة حتى لا نقوم بقرارات طول الوقت. مثلا أنا كمستهلك علي أن أقوم باختيار هل أشتري من هذا المحل أم لا، وأشتري بلاستيك أم لا، وهذا اختيار كبير. يعني ولا يستطيع تغيير استهلاك البلاستيك في العالم. وهناك أمور أو تغييرات تقع على مستوى المجتمع أو الأنظمة أو تقوم به الحكومات سواء محلية أو حكومة دولة أو على المستوى العالمي. يقع هذا الأمر أحيانا وفي أوضاع أخرى قد لا يقع. علينا أن نفكر كيف نشجع أصحاب القرار في القيام بذلك. مثلا هناك يعني منظمات للشباب حول البيئة والذين قد يخرجون للتظاهر ويعني يقومون بتوعية أصحاب القرار بأن هناك ناس مهتمين بالبيئة، وهذا يعني أثر بشكل كبير حول عدد من السياسات في العالم. يعني نحتاج إلى أن نحفز كل حكومة في العالم من أجل القيام بمجهودات من أجل البيئة. عالميا كان هناك اتفاقية باريس والتي هي اتفاقية عالمية قامت يعني بنتائج جيدة جدا، وإذا لم تساعدنا هذه الاتفاقية على الوصول إلى هدف يعني الحفاظ على حرارة لا تعلو عن 1.5 درجة، فعلينا أن نحفز المجتمعات المحلية والوطنية على تغيير قوانينهم وعلى تغيير طرق التفكير والتقرير مثلا حول الطاقة. إذن كل مرة نفكر في التغيير المستدام، إذا اخترنا نقطة معينة، إذا استطعنا تشجيع الحكومات على التغيير هذا طبعا سيكون له تأثير كبير حول أكثر من القرارات الصغيرة التي نقوم بها محليا أو شخصيا. هذا يعني إذا كنا نتكلم حول كيف نساعد المجتمع على التغيير وكيف يمكنني التأثير، إذا طرحت هذا السؤال على نفسي، كيف أقوم بالتظاهر بشكل أحسن، كيف أقوم يعني التأثير على أصحاب القرار أو على مؤسسات، مثلا أشتغل في شركة، هكذا يعني يمكن للتغيير أن يقع. ولأرجع لسؤالك، لا، ليست جميع المجتمعات أو ليست جميع الحكومات تقوم بهذه المجهودات الكافية، وهناك عدة أسباب لهذا. مثلا في كولومبيا، وهي واحدة من البلدان التي هناك عقوبات كثيرة يعني ومخاطر كثيرة للمناضلين البيئيين، كان هناك تقرير من الأمم المتحدة أن هناك عدد كبير من المدافعين عن البيئة توفوا في كولومبيا بسبب عملهم. يعني هناك معادن كثيرة يعني تسبب تلوث كثير، والحكومة ليس لها أي حافز للتغيير لأنها تستفيد من الضرائب ومن النقود الناتجة. وواحد من الأمور التي يمكن القيام بها هي التظاهر أو الاحتجاج ضد هذه الأنشطة، وذلك للتأثير على أصحاب القرار. يعني مثلا إذا كنتم تقيمون في السويد وأن هناك سياسيين أو دبلوماسيين يؤثرون على كولومبيا مثلا، يعني مثل هذه المجهودات الدبلوماسية هي أشياء يجب أن تقع. كذلك الاختيارات الشخصية هي مهمة، ولكن الأنظمة كذلك تحكم بشكل أكبر، وإذا استطعنا التأثير في الأنظمة فهذا سيكون شيئا قويا. في أمريكا هناك شيء اسمه كيف تحمي الكوكب، وطبعا المجتمع هو مرتبط بالأشخاص. مثلا إذا تكلمنا عن السيارات فنحتاج إلى قوانين من الدولة تشجع استعمال السيارات الكهربائية أكثر، بنفس الطريقة التي يعني يتم الآن محاربة البلاستيك من طرف عدة دول. فهذا ليس مجهود شخصي فقط، وإنما يجب أن يكون عمل من الحكومة، والتي كذلك تقلل من استعمال البلاستيك.
نفهم من الكلام انه او اللي
So we understand, or what I understood is that organization or institutions can be a link between governments and individuals in order to advance to next steps for sustainable society.
Yeah, and it's really important for you as an individual to speak to the institutions that you are connected to, whether it's your local government, your national government, or corporations or nonprofits in your area that can help you champion those issues.
Okay. شكرا أليكس.
Thank you, Alex. So I would like to come back to Hind and to Sweden. So I will ask you directly, Hind. Do you think that Sweden is doing what it needs to do, or is there more to be done in the society? So Sweden is a pioneer in the environment, but there are always some small things to adjust. So I will show the half that is empty of the glass. So these countries are trying to reach 0% in the percentage of non-recyclable waste, and that are in designed places in landfill in a way that limits the penetration of oxygen and water in them. Because as much as we can reduce this waste, it's better, of course, for the environment. We have also to mention that Sweden has a landfill of less than 1%, as we saw in the video. So these countries, like Sweden, they throw excess food in schools and kindergartens. And then this is actually funny. that the teachers, if they want to eat this food or eat food, they have to pay. But if you are throwing food, why don't you give it to teachers? Couldn't these communes or organizations give this food and sell it locally, for example? Find solution for that. So another thing, in the villas or in homes, there are only two garbage containers, one for food and one to be burned. So if I want to sort out as a personal effort, and I do it myself, and I take it to recycling center, isn't it better and more encouraging to have sorting bins in every residential cluster center? Why is it the commune of the municipality that is deciding on that? So we saw, for example, that from the agenda of United Nations that we need a clean environment. Another thing. So we talked about second hand, but as you see, it's open for people who are not busy. They open it only on working time. They don't open it on free times like weekends or evening. So it's not encouraging to buy second-hand things. Also, it is very important to teach importance of the environment and protecting it everywhere. But as I see, it's only about people interested. So there is no process or education process about teaching children, for example. We teach children alphabet and mathematics, but we are neglecting this aspect, for example, in the kindergarten. But for example, in the street, how can you teach in the street? So if we think that this is the solution to save our planet and sorting is our logic, me as a citizen, I need to find the sorting bins everywhere in the street, not only in a specific place, but I don't see them in the street. So there is only always one bin in the street. Yeah, so if we implement this, we'll have the sorting idea everywhere. And I will program people, if we say so, unconsciously, so that it becomes something natural to sort and have a sustainable environment, a society. Thank you very much, Hind.
يمكن احنا شوي في شويانة عتمة بالكلام اللي عم نسمعناه او في شويانة ناس يمكن
Rana, so there's something that needs to be clarified. We heard a lot about climate, about a lot of problems, but do you have any suggestions for solutions about all the problems we talked about? Of course. So we need to work together. So for the suggestions that are made, first of all, you have to reduce the emissions of carbon dioxide by 45% by 2030. By 2070, this emission should be 0%. So how does this happen? So you have to have less fossil fuel, use more renewable energy, for example, wind, water, solar energy, and also having more forests. What I also would like to add is that we as human beings, we need to advocate and share more culture about protecting the environment. This is our responsibility everywhere in our planet. And this is something facing humanity. There is no safe place more than other places. So if there are emissions in the south of the planet, also the north of the planet will be affected. So this is our responsibility, all of us. So climate change has put us, humanity, in the same boat. So we have to put our hands with each other and work together to be saved, or the boat will sink for everyone. So it's important, as Alex mentioned, like advocacy, making some pressure from the top to bottom, but we shouldn't also neglect that they could be changed from bottom to top. So let's leave the word of adults and let's talk with you, Hind, about children. You have mentioned very quickly kindergartens when you talked about Sweden, and also some solutions to have a better environment. So these changes that we're looking for, it's not only for adults, but needs to be started with the young people also. So what is the role of children, or how can we activate the role of children so that the futures, the adults of the future can be part of the change that is happening now? What can the children do? So as you know, we have to teach them right sorting. This is the most important thing. And as you said, they are the ground. It's the children. Children are solution for radical solutions. They are the generation of renewable and sustainable energy. And this needs to be taught already in the kindergarten. So they are the generations that are going to solve the problems that were created by other generations. So sometimes we're thinking about small things that are useless, but they have a lot of importance. So for example, I give a little bit of food to my child and I teach him not to waste food. So he will also think about that, and he will also not waste other resources. And there are a lot of examples about this area, and I cannot mention all of them. So for example, instead of letting my children playing video games about violence, why don't I give them video games about environment? One of the ideas I worked in personally is how we can use video games to teach sorting and recycling and sharing. So this game is called Boomy. This is the picture of Boomy, this video game, so that you can play on it on the future. And this is the logo. So it got an award of the influential game 2022 in north of Sweden. It talks about an ET that was living in another planet that was destroyed, and this person comes to planet Earth to tell us about the consequences and disasters that happened in their planet. And the demo is going to be launched very soon. So the also important things is to be close to nature in order to enjoy the nature more and to save it. And we should not leave the weather as a barrier for us. There are many groups that are encouraging people to spend time with their children in nature, where I am very active, which is called Discover Nature with your child. So this is the logo for this initiative. If you want to join. So first of all, you are more in harmony with the area you visit, and also you are in nature and you teach your children the love of nature. So let's use our social mentality and mindset for nature. And in our countries, you know, if it's a little bit cold, you don't leave your house. But in Sweden, this is not possible because the weather is always bad. And there is a proverb in Sweden saying, det finns ingen dålig väder, det finns bara dåliga kläder, which means in English, there is no bad weather. It's only your clothes that are bad. And this means that you have to put other clothes, and then it will not be the weather that will control you. And it's important to learn from the experience of people who have been living here for generations. Of course, you have to buy new clothes, second-hand new clothes. and teach your children how to use, for example, the waste for art, and give examples to our children, like Afia Rizq, who is an artist, who used waste, different sorts of waste, even like the cans, and made accessories out of these. So, for example, this is an accessory made from waste. All these accessories are made from waste. Excellent, very beautiful. So it's important to spend time with our children to teach them the value of things and to learn to innovate. Not because something is not working that we throw it. Maybe we have to fix it. For example, doing fixing your jeans or sewing them. So our grandparents, they were saving the environment without thinking about it. They were using solar energy to, for example, dry some vegetables. This is only like small, these are small ideas. In order to be conscious, I do not expect anyone to have their house full of waste, but nature is our big house that we have to take care about and protect it.
حابة أعقب على نقطة ذكرتيها هند
I would like to talk about a comment, a point you mentioned. So about throwing food or food waste.
برنامج الأغذية التابع للأمم المتحدة
So the FAO program of the United Nations mentioned that we need by 2050 we need to add or to increase food by 75%. But as you know, third of the food that is produced now is thrown. So if we change a little bit of the way we shop and we behave with food and plan, maybe by cooking more, it's like a third of the food is thrown now. So for example, IKEA,
انه هي تخفض نسبه النفايات بمطاعمها للنص.
it just decided to reduce the percentage of food waste in its restaurant in half. And this is like the equivalent of 4 Eiffel Towers. So this is what IKEA wants to reduce. And you know, people are dying of hunger in many countries. So, you know, so yes, there are a lot of examples, and you have mentioned that we want to take positive sides, the ones that are encouraging, and to advocate for it, market it, to follow these examples as soon as possible, so that to become better people, better organizations, and also to encourage governments for a sustainable environment. So I'll come back to Alex here. And of course, if you want to hear interpretation in Arabic, just go to the Arabic channel. So Alex, in our seminar, we would like to talk a bit also about our Wikimedian and Wikipedian word and its campaigns.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned at the beginning, this seminar is part of the campaign Wiki for Human Rights. So you are the chief coordinator for this campaign. Can you explain what is this campaign? When did it start? What are its objectives? Why did you want to start this campaign, Wiki for Human Rights?
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know,
إذا
Wikimedia
بالنسبة للذين لا يعلمون، فإن ويكيميديا هي المنظمة التي هي وراء ويكيبيديا، وهي التي تهتم بالموقع. حاليا ويكيبيديا متوفرة بأكثر من 300 لغة عالميا، وهناك أكثر من ربع مليون شخص يقومون بالتحرير عليها عالميا، كلهم محررون متطوعون. هناك إذا منصة تجمع المعرفة والعلم عبر العالم، وهدفها طبعا هو أنه كل شخص في العالم له الحق كحقوق الإنسان من إيجاد المعرفة بلغته وطبعا الأمور المتعلقة بالبيئة هي مواضيع مهمة بالنسبة للمجتمعات، والمجتمعات تطرح أسئلة حولها ونحتاج إلى إجابة حولها. إذن ويكي من أجل حقوق الإنسان هي مبادرة مرتبطة كذلك مع الأمم المتحدة، ونحاول العمل عليها بجميع اللغات من أجل توثيق حقوق الإنسان. وهذه السنة موضوع السنة هو البيئة، ونحاول العمل على تطوير المقالات المرتبطة بالبيئة في أكثر عدد من اللغات ممكنة. وهذا يعني يعزى إلى أنه عند اهتمام الناس بمواضيع البيئة من خلال هذه النقاشات يطرحون أسئلة: ما هذا؟ وكيف يعمل هذا؟ وهي أسئلة يطرحونها على فيسبوك وعلى تويتر، وويكيبيديا هي جزء من هذا الجواب. خصوصا ويكيبيديا مهمة جدا بالنسبة لنقل المعرفة في لغات ليست فقط الإنجليزية والسويدية والفرنسية واللغات الكبرى، بل أيضا في العربية والفارسية والكردية وأي لغة يعني محلية أو لغة صغيرة يتم تكلمها في العالم، حيث الإنترنت لا يتوفر على معلومات بجميع اللغات وخاصة معلومات حول البيئة. نحن الآن حاليا هناك حاليا لنا في ويكيبيديا 15 مليار يعني مشاهد في الشهر، ونريد أن يعني نشجعهم على أن يقرأوا حول البيئة كذلك. ومن المهم معرفة من هو الشخص الذي يعني يعرف هذه الأمور ومن الشخص الذي يعمل عليها. وإذا لا تعرفون الجواب حول المسائل البيئية تحتاجون إلى إجابات بلغتكم. مثلا إذا كنت تتكلم الأردو أو العربية تريد أن تعرف هذه المعلومات: ما هي الحقوق التي عندي أنا كشخص؟ أو حتى بشكل أبسط، إذا قرأت مقالة حول تيشيرت أريد أن أعرف أن السويديين يشترون 9 تيشيرتات في السنة، وهذا كثير. وأريد أن أعرف ما هو تأثير هذه الملابس أو التيشيرتات على البيئة، وهذا الأمر يؤثر في العالم. وقد يكون يعني الأمر لا يحترم حقوق الإنسان في مناطق مثل بنغلاديش، حيث هناك يعني معامل لا تحترم حقوق الإنسان. فنحتاج إلى توثيق هذه النقاط المتعلقة بالحقوق على منصات مثل ويكيبيديا، وهو ما يسمح للناس بفتح فضولهم والانطلاق في السفر كمناصرين للمسائل المتعلقة بالبيئة. أعتقد نانور أنه عندنا فيديو تظهر يعني بعض أعمال التحريرية. إذن
قبل الفيديو بعتذر قبل الفيديو
before the video
اسأل عن شغلة ذكرتها
I would like to ask Alex something you mentioned. So in this year 2021 is the right of a healthy environment. Why did you choose this specific item as for this year?
Yeah, human rights are big, kind of amorphous things for a lot of people. It's sometimes very hard to think about, like, what does the right to water mean for me, especially if you already have access to that right. But the right to a healthy environment, none of us have full access to that right now. That is a global issue, and society is dealing with it. We have not successfully defended a healthy environment. There was a German court case recently that a group of youth basically
هناك مجموعة من الناس في ألمانيا قاموا بمقاضاة الحكومة الألمانية بداعي أنها لم تقم بالقيام بمجهودات كافية من أجل البيئة. نفس الشيء في كولومبيا قبل سنوات، كان هناك عدد من الشباب قاموا بمقاضاة الحكومة، وذلك بسبب يعني قطع الغابات الأمازون. وقد كان يعني اتفقت المحكمة بأن هذا الأمر كان أمرا سيء وأنه تم يعني خرق عدة أمور من خلال قطع هذه الغابات. إذن أن نعرف حول حقوقنا البيئية وحول حقوق الإنسان، وأن تكون عندنا ويكيبيديا كمنصة، شيء تريد مجتمعاتنا العمل عليه، وهو شيء تحتاجه المجتمع في كل لغة وكل مجتمع. وإذا قمنا بالقيام به على منصة مثل ويكيبيديا والتي فيها أكثر من 300 لغة، وهي لغات قد لا تتوفر حولها معلومات حول البيئة خاصة اللغات الصغيرة، أعتقد أنه أمر قوي جدا، ولهذا أنا أظن أن الأمر مهم.
الحقيقة هو كان في سؤال عن أليكس، لك كان السؤال عن دور ويكيبيديا بالمشاركة الاستدامة، اللي قلنا من أول هي عم نحكي استدامة فكنا بدنا نحكي شو دور
in sustainability. But I guess that you answered it very well. And I guess we can now just watch the video.
I wanted to participate in this because I wanted to learn more in terms of how someone becomes a Wikipedia editor.
I think when we're working on adaptation to climate change, which is such a real-world issue, it's important that we communicate beyond just to academic audiences.
It was so mind-boggling that I never realized that I could also have a chance to edit Wikipedia.
An editathon is when a group of people come together to edit Wikipedia on a specific topic. And this is the first time an editathon has actually been held on climate change focused on Africa.
Topics related to Africa are very poorly covered, and this creates a knowledge gap. One of the drivers of that is that there are not enough people in Africa editing about African topics.
On the climate change page, the word Africa does not actually appear once. So there's quite an urgent need to try and enhance the coverage. With this event, we're bringing together African scholars to build a community of African editors focused on climate change.
The approach that we've taken so far is to look at some of the high-impact pages on Wikipedia, and having the collective expertise in the room has been great for looking at the kind of framing and narrative around some of those big issues.
I have entered edits into the page of climate change adaptation, which was really scanty when looking at it.
I've been able to edit pages around climate change and agriculture, specifically on Africa.
I've looked at the Botswana page, and I've also looked at the Okavango Delta page.
Il y avait un sous-titre qui porte sur les zones semi-arides. Malheureusement, il n'y avait pas d'information. Puisque notre zone de recherche au Sénégal portait sur les zones semi-arides, donc nous avons décidé d'éditer cette page-là.
There are very many advantages of having a dedicated event. It puts you far away from your work. You concentrate more on learning first and becoming a good editor.
Via Skype or Zoom, it's very hard to understand what someone else is saying, but in person, it's much easier. And also having Wikimedia, it's also easier to ask questions.
Our role in this editathon was to provide the expertise and the insight into how Wikipedia works and how climate change experts can participate in the free knowledge movement. The impact of Wikipedia as a source of global information is significant. It's accessible in over 300 languages.
En tant que francophone, nous avons besoin de trouver suffisamment d'informations en langue française. Et après avoir bénéficié de ce renforcement de capacité durant ces 3 jours, nous devons aussi, en tant que chercheurs, mettre des informations en français dans la plateforme Wikipédia.
Wikipedia is one of the platforms that the local person goes to, the community member, the policy member goes to as a first stop.
Allowing my research to be on that platform, I thought was a very good opportunity to let my research be known.
My eyes have been opened to, if I want the good information there, I can help put it there.
coming together with other researchers has been exciting because you're able to read together and write together, as well as bouncing ideas off of each other.
The sharing has been really good, where you think about one way, another person thinks about another way.
It has been a very nice experience, and I hope that connection would continue even after this meeting that we're having here.
What I'm planning to do after the Editathon event is teach other researchers how to add their own content into topics that are relevant to them.
The African women contribution editors to Wikipedia really feel, as a woman, my participation would be important to put the word out there that gender, yes, women or men or youth or the disabled can participate in sharing information.
The more you research, the more you realize there's a lot you don't know. So we hold back a lot in sharing information and data, but I think it's important to just put it out there for other people that might not have the time and the skills. So I think other researchers broadly should also come in and edit and see what they can add to Wikipedia. It's a good platform to give back and make information widely available to people.
Thank you. Yeah, so that was a video from a 2019 editing event. Like the kinds of editing
الحدث تم تنظيمه سنة 2019 من خلال عدد من المجتمعات عبر العالم. تمت فيه دعوة خبراء للكتابة على ويكيبيديا، ولكن ليس فقط الخبراء ولكن كل الأشخاص المهتمين بالبحث حول البيئة. وويكيبيديا يعني هي لو أتمنى أن تكون لكم فرصة للمشاركة.
الحقيقة أنا بعرف عن الورشات
I heard a lot about workshops that are made in Wikipedia about the content and that are frequently done. Could you please explain to us about these workshops or editathons? What should I do to join? Where do you broadcast information about them? How can I participate?
So each country or context has a community. So in Sweden, Wikimedia Sweden is the kind of organizer of these events, and Nanur and others can help you connect with them. But if you're in another Arabic-speaking context, we have Wikimedia communities around you in the Levant, in Egypt, across North Africa. There are Wikimedia communities who you can connect with and train, and they can help get you started. Arabic Wikipedia, for example, is one of the fastest growing Wikipedias, and it's a really great place to join. But there are huge environmental knowledge gaps.
يعني نقص كبير حول المقالات المتعلقة بالبيئة، ويعني كان هناك فقط 6 ملايين قراءات حول المقالات المتعلقة بالتغير المناخي، واللغة العربية هي لغة كبيرة جدا، ولكن لا زال هناك نقص في الوعي بهذه المواضيع، وهناك ليس عدد كبير من الناس المهتمين بهذا الأمر الذين يكتبون على ويكيبيديا. إذا يعني أشخاص مثل نانور وويكيميديا السويد يمكن أن يجعلون يعني يربطونك لكي تصل إلى هذه الوركشوبس أو هذه الورشات.
سوف تكون خطوتنا القادمة. عفوا إدموند، تفضل.
تمام، معناته بننسق معك هلا مباشرة إذا كنا بدنا نعمل
So we will directly synchronize with you, Nanur, if we want to work further. So unfortunately, we had 1 hour and a half. We have less than 5 minutes. So unfortunately, we will not take the questions and answer them, but we will answer them directly on the chat from all the friends that have asked us. Just Edmond, there was a suggestion. I will read it. So as a Wikimedian, there's a suggestion to have an environmental agreement for each Wikimedian or group wanting to organize an event where they have to impose themselves, for example, not to throw food that is funded by the foundation, not use plastic bags and other examples, so that the foundation, for example, could have an agreement with groups. And this is very interesting and useful suggestion. Thank you, Yamin. Please, Edmund. So there was a question from Professor Hassan Al-Maghout mentioning that there are a lot of municipalities working on this area, and Professor Hassan is an expert in this area. So throwing food in kindergartens is indeed important. Our friend also who asked about if the next immigration is the climate immigration. And yes, we talk a lot about immigration. We have 1.5 minutes. This seminar is really interesting and also complex to digest. And if someone is not specialist, maybe it can find difficulties, but at least we are trying to advocate and explain that today, not tomorrow, today, we have to save our planet, not only for us, and but also for the next generations. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Edmund. Just before I finalize with the last word, I would like to thank all the participants who joined us and who followed us in discussing this very important subject, the environment and sustainability, which is really an emergency currently, and for which we have to work all together. So the seminar is mostly for Arabic speaking.
الويكيبيديين والويكيميديين المهتمين بالبيئة وموضوع الاستدامة والتنمية المستدامة. بحب أتشكر راعي اللقاء ويكيميديا السويد، وبتشكر شبكة كومبس الإعلامية اللي نقلت الحدث مباشر عبر منصاتها. معنا من التقنية بتشكر علاء برغوث وشكر خاص لميشيل وأليكس منسقي حملة ويكي حقوق الإنسان لعام 2021. كان عنوان اللقاء أن أحمي البيئة لتضمن المستقبل، ونحن سمعنا خلال ساعة ونص أنه هالمستقبل قريب جدا، هو ليس خارج إطار زماننا أو جيلنا، هو بعد 10 سنين ويمكن يكون أبكر. لا نريد الحياة مع الأوبئة والأمراض، نحن اختبرناها مع كوفيد-19. لا نريد المواد المدمرة اللي لا نعرف كيف نتصرف بها وكيف نمحيها من الوجود. الحل ليس تعجيزاً ولا إعجازاً، الحل بسيط، تغييرات بنمط حياتنا، نتمرن على هالتغيير، نمارسه، نجعله جزء من نمطنا اليومي وجزء من محيطنا. فننشر الوعي، نساهم باستمرار الحياة. هذه هي رسالتي ورسالة هذا اللقاء، وهذه هي رسالة حملة ويكي حقوق الإنسان، لأن نحن أبسط حقوقك أنك تتنفس الهواء النقي وتعيش ببيئة نظيفة. فشكرا كثير، شكرا لمتابعتكم المشاهدين، وتحياتي إلى اللقاء.
شكرا
لكم. شكرا.
يعطيكم العافية.